Hello and a very warm welcome to this Youth Research Dialogue, which is part of our thematic online series of evidence-based youth research findings. My name is Carmen Teubel. I'm the project manager and the coordinator for the European Youth Research Network RAY, which is hosted here at the Finnish National Agency for Education. Yeah, the network currently consists of 34 partners, and these are national agencies of the European Youth Programs and national research partners. Before I tell you a bit more about our today's topic, one remark: we are live streaming today from 2 channels, so not only our Facebook channel, but also from our RAY YouTube channel. So please free to comment anytime, or if you have questions, just leave them there. Yeah, for this Youth Research Dialogue, we have just decided to shift our focus a bit, and instead of discussing recent RAY research findings and youth research findings in general, we aim more for future-oriented dialogue. So particularly, we will talk about the topic and the question of how to research digital youth work in the future. RAY has related findings to this topic from previous and ongoing studies, for example, from our RAY monitoring studies, which are monitoring the impact of the youth programs, and our ongoing thematic project on the role of digitalization. And we will also hear a bit about them, but we are striving to have to focus more on analysis and discussing the needs and the future needs and the challenges in relation to the topic. Our guest speaker today is Juha Kiviniemi. He is a digital youth work expert. He's currently working for Verke, which is the National Center for Expertise on Digital Youth Work in Finland. His current interests include exploring the implementation of the digital priority in the youth programs, and on the practice side, the potential of AI-generated art for youth work. From RAY, we have today Friedemann Schwenzer with us, which is part of the transnational research team of RAY. Yeah, he works at the intersections of youth work and research, and is also the co-author of a curriculum on digital youth work. Within RAY, he focused on the digitalization within the European youth field. So welcome to both of you. As always, our moderation is done by Tomi Kilakoski and digital facilitation by Domagoj Moric. Enjoy, and please feel free to participate and ask your questions, and see you briefly at the end of this dialogue.
Hello, my name is Tomi Kilakoski, and I will be your moderator today. We live in the digital age, and the digital age lives in us. Today, we will talk about digital youth work, and while doing so, digital age speaks through us, since our conceptions about human interaction, politics, or even falling in love are affected by digital tools available and digital cultures connected to these tools. Therefore, it is not surprising that there is growing interest on digital youth work, which is our topic today. In the Council conclusion from 2017, it was stated that smart youth work, we prefer to call it digital youth work in this dialogue, and I'm quoting now, aims to explore the interactions of young people and youth work with digital media and technologies in order to support and enhance the positive opportunities these interactions create, unquote. The expert group recommendation of the EU on digital youth work from 2018 reminded us that digital youth work can be done in face-to-face situations as well as in online environment, and that it can be included in any youth work setting. So the topic is really wide today. Our dialogue will be recorded, and the live stream will be available afterwards. We ask you kindly to comment on the discussion and ask questions. You can ask questions on Facebook and or YouTube chat or on Mentimeter, and the Menti code is being displayed on the screen. Our first speaker today is Juha Kiviniemi. Go ahead, Juha.
Hi, so my name is Juha Kiviniemi and I come from Verke. And Verke is the National Center for Expertise on Digital Youth Work. So we are very fortunate to really focus on this topic day in, day out in our work. First, I wanted to highlight a survey that we did for municipal youth workers in Finland. Now, this is reflecting the structure of Finnish youth work scene, where municipal youth work is the biggest single actor. And we got quite a few responses also on our last survey, over 900 responses. And we covered pretty much all of Finland, as you can see in the chart. One thing I want to highlight here is when on the next slide you see we asked them several questions, and we see that, for example, infrastructure is fairly good, and a lot of respondents also perceived their own digital competences to be at least on a basic level. So the competences and the infrastructure are there. But what was really highlighted still, even though we've been working with organizations on a strategic development of digital youth work, that digital youth work still lacked a lot of goals. Now, this is an interesting question whether digital youth work should have its separate goals or should they just reflect the goals of youth work in general, but both are, I think, equally valid. But it's a bit alarming that 45% felt that the biggest hindrance for high-quality digital youth work practice is the lack of goals. And on the next slide, there are a couple of other percentages highlighted. So only 33% of respondents indicated that they actually do have goals for digital youth work in their work communities. And furthermore, 31% said that they have some sort of indicators to actually evaluate their work. Now, this is a big problem, of course, when you talk about development of the field, developing digital youth work in general. How can you really develop in a strategic way if you don't really know what you're striving towards or what you're really assessing? Now, one project that looks at these things as well is the Digital Youth Work Snack run by the National Agency of Finland. And Work Package 1, which we supported the EduFi in running, concentrated on higher quality digital content in youth policies. And this was really interesting because our participants in this work package were actually members from national ministries. And the plan was to heighten their competences and see where the difficulties lie in implementing digitalization in youth work. And on the next slide, I have a couple of recommendations from the report. This is not all of it. You can find this on EduFi website. But what came up really a lot was fostering cross-sectoral cooperation on all levels. So in planning, in implementation, etc. That's the thing that they really saw that would lead to higher quality policies regarding digitalization. Another thing that came up constantly was also proper and timely evaluation of both the practice and the policy, whether it's achieving the goals that it should. On the next slide is from another work package in the same project. This is work package 2 run by the Estonian National Agency, and this is still ongoing at the moment. We're set to see the final results next March, and they are looking at building a competence model for digital youth work for practitioners. This would be highly useful to have, or will be highly useful to have in the field, because then we can really start seeing in organizations whether we have the competences that practitioners actually need to implement high quality work or not. And currently, this kind of model for the youth field does not exist. In the next slide, there's another work package. This was work package 5 that looked at hybrid and blended mobilities. And this is more, of course, to the European youth programs. So this is, of course, a very big challenge for funding, for evaluation, and whether these hybrid and blended mobilities should should have the status of real face-to-face mobilities, things happening in person or not. Even in our national survey, we notice always that about 50% of youth workers value face-to-face interactions on the same level as online interactions. So that's a big debate still going on both in the Finnish and European youth fields. That's for my very short introduction, and I'm looking forward to this discussion about the topic. Thank
you. Thank you, Juha. Once again, I remind you to comment on the presentations. Please ask questions using Facebook, Mentimeter, or YouTube chat. Our next speaker is Friedemann Schwenzer.
Hi, my name is Friedemann Schwenzer, and I work at the RAY transnational research team. And what I'm going to do within the next 5 minutes is to walk you quickly through the past, present, and future of the RAY research on digitalization. So I'm going to talk about 3 projects, RAY Mon, RAY Core, RAY Digi. And then I'm gonna conclude with 3 reflections on how to research digital youth work in the near future. And let's start with the past, with a project called RAY Mon. RAY Mon is our monitoring survey. We conducted every 2 years and aim at monitoring the effects of the European youth programs on participants and project leaders. And it's about to be redesigned currently for the current project program generation. And we have a special thematic focus on digitalization. But let's see what we find in the last program generation. So I'm gonna provide you 3 insights. Of course, there are much more, but one thing we found striking is that 20% of the participants indicated they learned something new about media and ICT, and actually it's one of the least popular items. So we think there actually could be done more when it comes to digital literacy. But some positive news, when people or participants actually say they learned something or improved their digital abilities, then there's no major gap when it comes to gender or geography or minority affiliation. And there seems to be even some balancing effects, like participants that perceive themselves as less privileged tend to improve their digital abilities even more. But however, there is a certain kind of mismatch. Project participants or like project leaders tend to overestimate their impact on participants. And later on, we would like to dig a little bit deeper into that. But for now, that's the 3 insights from the monitoring. And the next project is RAY Core. The RAY Core project focuses on effects of the coronavirus pandemic on youth work in Europe. And there are a lot of research activities, but I want to draw your attention to 2 surveys we conducted. One is on the impact of the pandemic on youth work, and one on recovery programs. And these 3 findings are from these 2 surveys. So the first finding is not surprising, probably, but to see the numbers is still graphic. So 93% of the youth workers indicated that they moved at least up to 1/3 of their youth work online. So actually almost every youth worker in Europe had some experience with online youth work. And what we find interesting is that youth work values were also affected, but we don't know yet how, and want to find out more about that. Even though a lot of funding went already into digitalization, organizations indicated that expert advice would still be the most useful support for them. And the last finding, which was interesting for us, that youth workers said that when everything moved online during the pandemic, and formal education and non-formal education actually used the same online spaces, there was a certain need to clarify what's the role of non-formal education in online settings. This brings us to the present of our current research project, RayDigi. It explores different dimensions of digitalization within the European youth programs. There are, again, a lot of research activities going on, but we also pick up on research and research findings from the previous projects. So we want to focus a little bit on this mismatch I was talking about, the gaps between the relevance of digitalization in young people's life and youth work, and how to overcome those, and also shed a light on the role of non-formality in online setting, and have a look on what's the unique character of a non-formal online learning. This brings us to the future, to the near future. I thought I'd kick off the discussion with some, 3 reflections. So the first one would be, I think now is the time to harvest the lessons learned from the pandemic. So everything happened really rapidly, and now it's the time to intellectually digest what happened. But on the other hand, let's not be dazzled by the pandemic. So what happened during the pandemic is only a little part of what digital youth work actually is. And we don't know whether the experience during the pandemic helped youth worker, for example, to understand digital youth culture better, or if this helped to meet the digital needs of young people. So let's not be dazzled here. And last thought would be, let's not pretend we know, digitalization is an ongoing process, and technology is changing rapidly all the time. So we should not be afraid of asking simple questions all over again. And yeah, let's not pretend we know. That's from my side.
Thank you, Juha and Friedemann, for these enriching discussions and your valuable inputs from your research findings and also from your practice. It's time to move to the dialogical part. Now, I would like to start with the really basic question. Digital youth work has been criticized for the fact that sometimes it lacks a widespread definition and accepted definition of what digital youth work actually is. So first question to Juha. In your opinion, what is digital youth work and what it isn't?
There is a shared European definition, but that's true that it's maybe not a widely accepted one or widely adopted one. But the short answer is very simple. Whenever you're in the field and you're doing youth work that somehow uses or addresses digital media or digital technology, then you're already in the realm of digital youth work. The slightly longer answer is that you can use always digital youth work as a tool, activity, or a content in youth work. So like now during the pandemic, we mostly used it in the field as a tool to reach young people when youth centers were closed. It could be an activity, like, for example, I built robots with youth workers and helped them do that with kids as well. So that would be a new activity around digital technology. Or it can be addressing, let's say, effects of social media on young persons' well-being, and then it would be the content of the youth work. But it's always about youth work. It's about youth work being in the core, and it's always underpinned by the youth work values, ethics, and goals that are already there.
Friedemann, you were nodding a lot. Do you agree with Juha's ideas and the
I
European
couldn't
definition?
agree more.
Good. Then moving on to the second question, which is tied to what Friedemann was saying about the results of European programs. Based on our studies done by Finnish Youth Research Network, it seems that at least in Finland, international youth work is considered to be about mobilities. And because of that, during COVID times, international youth work went down because it isn't about digital interaction. In your opinion, Friedemann, what is the connection between mobilities and digital youth work? And in your opinion, what could be done to strengthen this sort of connection?
Well, I think looking back at the pandemic, like there's a certain misconception, like the digital cannot be a patch on other mobility activities, like the sort of experience you get as a young person going abroad, adapting to new environments and meeting new people face to face. It's hard to do it online, and so there's a misconception, and the online mobility cannot be a patch on that experience, and shouldn't be. But what we should actually think about or striving for is gaining a better understanding when actually go online, when using hybrid, and when using face-to-face, and making it a conscious decision. And what happened during the pandemic, it was most of the time not a conscious decision, but out of necessity. But however, I think we should also have a look on the changing technologies and new technologies like virtual reality, for example, that will change the way online mobility will look like. And last thing, probably, as you have said, like digital youth work is not about online youth work, and during physical mobility, a lot of learning about digital issues can happen, actually. So mobility and digital youth work are not antagonists, I'd say.
Do you want to comment on this, Juha? Any wild ideas on how to integrate online tools to mobilities?
I would love to see approaches where mobilities would take the effects of, or the societal effects of digitalization as a core topic that young people in the mobility are learning about. A lot of the projects I've seen so far are either about having an online component, if I don't now address the fully virtual mobilities, but it's a lot about having a online component to prepare kids or get them to know each other, but then it's completely digitalization and digital technology is completely set aside during a mobility project. So having something organically there, like, for example, let's say if youth workers use this kind of cards where young people at the start of the day can show what emotion they're feeling towards the day. They could use an AI image generator to actually generate an image that shows their feeling, and then they could discuss the implications of technology at the same time. So kind of really organically putting digital technology front and center as a part of the thing would be what I would love to see.
Thank you. I will remind once again that you can ask questions using Menti or Facebook or YouTube, and the Menti code is currently being displayed. Now let us move on to how digital youth work is done. Pedro Fernandez de Castro has written an article with his colleagues, and there he distinguishes between 3 different ways of doing digital youth work. And I think 2 last ones are really interesting. Second one is about promoting youth participation, and the third one is also promoting youth participation, but the emphasis on critical and civic aspects. And I would be tempted to say that most of the digital youth work is done using the second alternative, promoting youth participation, and there could be more to be done in helping young people to become more critical. Now, question for both of you: do you agree with this idea I just presented? And if you do, what could be done to help youth workers and help the youth field better integrate civic and critical elements to digital youth work?
I can start. I believe I do agree with this statement. I think we should move more into civic and critical aspects, but I think we also shouldn't look past the potential of creative aspects of digital technology, in the sense how young people's creativity could be supported alongside developing their civic and critical competences, because I think that would motivate young people a lot to also engage in these activities. Often, if we talk about critical media literacy or critical data literacy, it comes off as a bit of a preaching approach, which I'm sure we don't want to do, but it tends to sound like that to a lot of young people. So integrating that into a holistic approach where we address all of these things at the same time, I think that would be the key.
What about you, Friedemann?
I pretty much agree with the statement, and I like looking back at how the discourse on digitalization and youth work was in the past, and is sometimes still in the present, that it was actually like youth work had like something is happening, something is changing, and we have to keep up and understand what happens to young people, and we kind of have to navigate the risks they are facing in online worlds. And this, of course, is not enough. And if you talk about like a critical civic approach to digitalization and how youth work could support that, that would actually mean to rethink or to think of a way that youth work actually becomes an actor when it comes to digitalization and shapes the discourse on digitalization. And so in the end, this would actually mean we have to rethink like the transition from youth to adulthood, and in digital terms, and what the role of youth work is in this, like how to empower young people in terms of the digital, how to engage them with policy in terms of digitalization, and so on. So actually, there's a lot of intellectual work that has to be done within the youth field in order to enable young people to become like this critical digital citizens we sometimes dream of.
There is a theme that is often connected to these courses on digitalization, which is a gender perspective. We tried our best organizing this dialogue, but we ended up having an all-male panel, which sort of repeats the power structures of talk about digitalization. So in your opinion, in digital youth work, concerning the future research, is there something that we should know more about the gender issues connected to digital youth work? And in your opinion, what youth work should do, digital youth work, with the question of such as harassments in the gaming cultures?
Well, I can go first again. In Finland, there have been several projects, for example, highlighting and working with gaming communities to kind of weed out this kind of toxic culture and harassment and this kind of stuff. And I think those kinds of projects, whether they're from Finland or elsewhere, they need to be highlighted more visibly to kind of look at best practices and learning from those, and really taking note of how that should be incorporated to all practice, addressing the same kind of communities. I think in a wider sense, it's a theme that we really have to keep front and center all the time. I mean, for example, I mentioned that I train youth workers on how to use robotics and maker stuff in their work with young people, and immediately often the thought goes like, okay, we have this group of guys that are having a LAN party, so they might be interested on this stuff. And I always go, yes, but why don't you also recommend it to everyone who wants to try it out? So we keep leaving girls as well out of the conversation. And I think that goes up to the expert level as well. I mean, I've been in several discussions recently how the experts on digital youth work in the European field, it's a very narrow group, and it's not completely, but too much of an all-male panel as well. So we kind of have to open that up somehow as well.
What about you, Friedemann?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, power structures and male dominance. It's a societal problem, and we find it at all levels. So maybe one thought I would add is like, and not belittling the problem, but like when we talk about new technologies, there's sometimes a phenomenon happening that's called moral panic. So we kind of focus on a new technology and focus and pin the problems we have within society to this new technology. And to a certain degree, it's true, the digital amplifies hate, and but we shouldn't fool ourselves and say this is a new thing and it's only due to new technologies. But we have to address exclusion mechanisms as a society.
Do you want to continue, Juha?
No, I think Friedemann said it well. I think a lot of youth workers will also need support in the field, how to look at this phenomena on a societal level. I have the feeling that youth workers are already somewhat far along, in the sense that they're looking at their own practice, in the sense, is it equal, and is it accessible, and is it inclusive enough? But then once we start talking about themes like advocation and the societal role of youth work, we're leaving some practitioners behind. So kind of a big question, I think, is how to get the whole field involved in this discussion about it.
Yes, we promised to talk about future research. One of the themes that keeps popping up in the discussions on digital youth work is the need to develop evaluation. And it was also shown in your presentations, I think, in both of your presentations. So in your opinion, what we should do better in the future in evaluating what digital youth work does? Friedemann, maybe you want to start this time so we don't keep repeating the same structure.
Well, I'm actually not an expert on evaluation of youth work, and like the researcher who has done most within this field of research is Alicia Pavlychuk. I could only briefly summarize the discussions around that. Like, there's a general problem with evaluation that if you ask young people to fill out a form after an activity, they kind of know that the funding of the youth center or the youth worker depends on that. And leaving this aside, like when it comes to digital youth work, you kind of have to understand what's the impact of the digital and what's the impact of the youth work. And then we end up having the discussion, does digital youth work actually have the same goals as non-digital youth work? And yeah, I think it's an ongoing debate, but like I think what needs to be done, and also Juha's presentation showed it quite clearly, to sharpen the goals of digital youth work in order to have something we actually look for to measure the impact. And I think this is still some intellectual work ahead of us.
We have an audience question for you, Friedemann. So I'll ask it now, and I will ask you to please wait a minute or so. And the question goes like this: what are the plans for future Ray research in terms of digitalization and digital youth work? So it's a bit wider question.
As I said, like we currently have this research project called Ray Digi. So we are about to conduct focus groups on national level with youth workers and young people to understand better the gaps between the needs of young people and youth work, and how and also to understand what going online actually makes with youth work, like value-wise, or what kind of competences they need. So this is one of the modules we conduct now, but Ray Digi also contains like the redoing of the monitoring survey. So we actually facing the big questions, how to monitor digital youth work in the future. And we had some questions in the past on digitalization, but we also learned that questions become outdated pretty soon. And when looking forward, like a program generation is quite long and a lot of things change. So that's one of the challenges we're facing, but yeah, we try to have a focus on digitalization in the monitoring as well.
Wonderful, and thank you, Friedemann. And everybody in the audience, if you're really fast, you can still ask questions and we will answer them. So Juha, your turn. On evaluation.
Yeah. Now, I would maybe add to what Friedemann said, that goals are definitely important. I don't feel like it's a big difference whether the goals are for youth work or digital youth work separately, but I think it's also a lot about a strategic way of thinking of how we develop our youth work practice. If we develop a completely new practice around a digital tool or a digital platform or a digital technology, then we should compare our metrics from that process to something similar that done in the past. And if the goals of the practice and the values of the practice are still the same, then we should be able to see whether the digital component of it had a positive or a negative impact in the outcome. But we often tend to look at digital youth work practice either in a very sporadic way time-wise, so it's only in singular projects, or it's completely separated from other day-to-day non-digital youth work practice. So having a really strong, holistic, strategic approach to this, I think, might help a lot in also the evaluation part.
I have a question to both of you, perhaps first to Juha. Friedemann talked about mismatch between the perception of participants and project leaders. And project leaders, they're more confident that digital learning occurs in the exchanges. How would you start either researching or training your workers to better understand this phenomenon? And do you recognize the same mismatch?
I do recognize the same thing in projects in Finland as well, where youth workers have looked at helping young people gain new competences or new skills around digital technology. They often say that we've gone through the motions, so there must be development. It's a tricky thing to evaluate, but it needs to have a really robust mechanism where at the very basic level, young people need to be included in a common discussion on what they've learned and how do they see their own learning in the process, because that's the only way things can really develop. Of course, it's tricky if young people are learning about the same things in other environments as well. So who's to say what has been learned where? But it's having that evaluation, reflection, discussion with young people is, I think, key.
Thank you, Juha. Friedemann, you mentioned that you are going to study this more closely. So your ideas and thoughts on this?
I mean, like the first idea would be that, like, in order to measure competences, like, you have to be competent yourself in order to know what new skills people learn. You already need to have the skills. So we probably should have a look on youth workers' skills, but also going beyond skills. I think there's sometimes a mismatch between youth work and young people. Like, for example, when it comes to digital youth culture, and to think about how to integrate digital youth culture into youth work and things like this. So I think the gap between youth workers and young people is not only that youth workers overestimate the impact on young people, but it's much broader.
Warm thanks to both of you. That was our last question. Thank you, guys. And thank you all for joining our fourth youth research dialogue in 2022.
And in case you would like to watch this episode again, or you or your colleagues have missed it, we have good news. The live stream will be also available afterwards.
Yes, and thank you to both of you, Tommy and Domagoj. From my side, we have also a next youth research dialogue planned already. The date is the 28th of November, so please already save the date, and any updates can be seen on our Ray website or on our social media channels. So thanks for being with us today, and take care, and see you hopefully next time.